discover a different way of living and being, sharing simple practices to unlock your conditioned tendencies and live in the present. Well-being and conscious living expert. Brian studied Tibetan Buddhism, yoga, and meditation from the Tibetan Lama Tarthang Tulku. Teachings at the Ratna Ling Retreat Center for 2 years. Committed to conscious lifestyle practices, Brian also co-founded Conscious Action, a movement of people committed to living more intentionally and you being you, offering practical lifelong well-being pathways for heart-connected conscious living. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for having me here and for this beautiful space to have conversations.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And I'm really excited to dive into where you started, what your journey has been like from like studying neuroscience to becoming deeply involved in practicing yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yes, definitely. It's always interesting, talking about my journey, going back and seeing the things that come up every time that I share about it. I was really fortunate that when I was a kid, my parents started their own, personal development, spiritual path. And that little by little started to come into the family dinners and into some of the things that we were into, and then what they would recommend. So by the time that I was a teenager, like they would recommend different books and different practices, and I would go and I would try the things that my parents would suggest, partly because looking back, I didn't really understood what I fit in. I was a lot of times quite different than a lot of my friends, and I wanted different things. So when I found these different practices, I really resonated with them and I connected with them, and that led me to explore them more and more and more. And I remember so much the first time that I went and I did a Tibetan yoga class, which most people have never even heard of Tibetan yoga around the world. But I went to a class, and for the first time in my life, I actually felt my body. I thought up until then that I was connected to my body and that I knew how it felt. I didn't. I noticed that I was super disconnected from my body and from the experience, that it wasn't in my head. And I was really stressed out at that moment as a teenager. And when I started driving when I was 16 back in Argentina, for anybody that has been in Buenos Aires, like the the traffic is really bad. So I used to get road rage. And when I started to practice all of this, not only I started to reconnect with my body and my feelings, I also started to notice how that was transferring into my everyday life, because I wasn't getting this burst of anger when I was driving. I was actually being able to notice, oh, wow, there's this feeling that is bubbling up, but I was able to feel it and then respond appropriately. And so I was starting to notice all of that. And then my parents invited me to go and to do some Reiki healing. And then I was like, oh, wow. So I wanted to learn how that went. And then we went to some sound bath experiences. And I loved that. And so all of that led me to more and more and more, and to read more books. Like for the ones that are able to see my room, like I have a lot of books all around personal development, spirituality, different traditions around the world. And so I was exploring all of this, and then parallel to that, I was studying. I studied to be a journalist, and I worked as a journalist back in Argentina for a few years. And then I did my postgrad in neuroscience, and that was really interesting because it gave a lot of framing from language to a lot of the experiences that I was having. It gave me an understanding of what is actually happening in our brain when we do things, but for me it was more related. Oh, okay, when I'm meditating or when I'm doing this practice or when I'm connecting, this is what takes place. A new neural pathway is created. So I started to understand more, and that actually led me to a lot of the work that I'm doing now, because I can find really ways to communicate to everyone. Because if someone is spiritually inclined, I can talk to them. If someone is more scientifically inclined, I can talk to them. So I have found for the last 15 years, especially, that all of that has been really powerful as I started to work on this, because I didn't set up to like I didn't set out to work doing this. I was just doing that for me.
Right. Right. That is so amazing because I personally am very grounded in science, and it is so beautiful to be able to see or to frame things up for people and meet them where they're at. And, it's the same, we all get to the same goal, or we're getting to the same concept, but just framed up in a different way, whether you're science-based or spiritually based, or maybe somewhere in between, right?
Yeah. And also, just that I find a lot of times that some things that are talked about as if they are spiritual, they are heavily like based on science. It might not be our Western style of science, but they are super scientifically like researched in a sense through hundreds and hundreds of years and hundreds of experiences, like Chinese medicine, Tibetan Buddhism, that is part of what I studied, like Hinduism, like there's this ancient Eastern philosophies that is what a lot of people, we talked about as spiritual, that there's a lot of amazing scientific understanding on philosophy, psychology, everything.
Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting too, because once you start to look for it, it doesn't end. Like there's so many books, so many studies. If you go into like journals, medical journals and whatnot, and there's so much evidence that there is a lot of science in the things that we're doing in the spiritual side of things.
Yes. And,
You mentioned,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that a lot of times it's interesting. Why do we need the scientific validation for an experience? And also the importance of understanding how our inner experience, some information or knowledge can enhance it as well. So it's this interesting balance of both things.
Yeah, it is very interesting. It made me think of like there is this thing that I teach in boundaries course where it's like it's the resolve within you. If you can trust and surrender, it will all happen. If you're looking for the how, there's like some resistance that gets in there. But some people need the how, and they need to understand how it's made.
Yes, definitely. Mm.
You mentioned going through all of these methods as you were a young teenager, a young adult growing up, and you were really interested in it, and you were able to work through some things, whether it was emotional or kind of find your way. Do you think that it was the methods itself, or is it what it was providing you, which was coming more into alignment within yourself and that space and time to discover who you were?
That's a great question. I think that it was that these methodologies allow me to connect to that part of me. Um, and also what I realized through the years, because I have studied and trained in a lot of different methodologies, is that there's a reason why I resonated at that specific moment to those practices. There's a reason why at some point, I went fully into Tibetan Buddhism and I really explored that. And I even went, as you mentioned, for a few years to California to a retreat center and really went deep into that practice. And then all of the other practices that I have done, that some of them it was like they were really helpful at some moment, and then some years later they came back. Some of them have been constant. I think that it's about, for me, the understanding that there's so many different methodologies,
Mhm.
what is the one that is going to support me in connecting to my being, my essence, and how I want to live my life. And that has been one of the interesting things on getting to understand how all of these different methodologies that come from different traditions, come from different countries, come from different eras, they actually all blend beautifully together, for me at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen a few things where for example, the Incas had the chakra system at some point, and it matched perfectly with what we were seeing in Hinduism, which was really interesting. And they all kind of blend, and they all kind of get to exactly where you need to be. But what was reminding me, or what I was thinking about as you were talking, is, for people that have tried meditation and then they kind of give up, because that was kind of my journey too, like 10 years ago. Like, okay, I hear meditation is the thing to do, and that's the only thing I knew about. I didn't know anything about yoga practices or breath work or what have you. And I would try meditation, it wouldn't work. I was still talking to myself, right? And then I would give up, and then I would be in all of my suffering for like another 2 3 years, and then I would come back and try meditation. What would you say to somebody that is really trying to step into their alignment and they want to try some of these methods? What would you recommend?
Yes, that's so great because I have found through the years that a lot of people have an idea of what these practices are or what they need to be. And as an example, meditation, because I it's one of the things that I teach. Most people think that meditation is you sit down, cross-legged, you close your eyes, there's no more thoughts.
Right. That was
Well,
the definition. That's what I thought I was supposed to be doing.
exactly. So, like the thing there is understanding that, okay, potentially at some point, potentially, we might get there. But that is not where we are today. As I said, for example, like when I was a kid, I used to be completely in my mind. That's all that I knew. So there's no way that I'm going to sit down and that's going to stop because that's the only thing that I know. From from a neuron's perspective, the same neurons are going to keep on firing. Like they are not going to stop just because I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm going to meditate now. What I usually say to people is, one, understand that if you're going to practice meditation, to know that you are going to still be thinking, even for years that might happen. What might happen is that through practice, you might expand your awareness, you might create longer moments of stillness. That doesn't even mean there's no more thoughts, it's about stillness. Most importantly, when I say to people, and I share about meditation, it's about understanding, creating moments of connecting to ourselves and creating moments of being present. Whether that is sitting down in my cushion like I am now, closing my eyes in my room, or whether that is talking to you, or when I'm, like walking on the street, or when I'm teaching a class, it doesn't matter because it's the way that I am being. Of course, with different meditation practices, there's different aims or different outcomes. Initially, what I always say is take a moment to connect. And if sitting is not the right way for you to connect going out to nature, connect, like doing something else, put some music on and dance and connect in that way. When we can get to the point that we realize, okay, this is what being connected and present looks like, and this is, like in comparison or contrast to the times that we are not present and we are just on autopilot, then we can realize, okay, now I'm more familiar with how this might look like. So then if I want to, I can sit down and I can either focus on my breath or focus on my feelings or focus on something that will support my awareness coming to that place and bringing the attention there, and therefore potentially lessening my stress or my anxiety or whatever it is that I'm going through, or even my thought velocity in a sense. So we need to understand a lot of times when we're talking about these things that for a lot of us it's like, oh, I have, as you say, like, oh, I heard that meditation is great. Well, for me, one of the things was I needed the movement.
Mhm.
I like my initial practices that actually supported me were the Tibetan yoga, which allowed the energy to move and allowed me to be more in contact with the feelings, but they need to be stimulated so that I could actually bring the mind into the body. And then the other one was with sound healing, because the sounds were so encompassing that there was not that much space for thinking. I was paying so much attention to the sounds around me and to the vibrations in my body that I was like, that's where my attention was going. Those were the ones that led me to later on be able to actually sit down and to be like, okay, I don't need any of that. I can actually sit still and bring my mind into stillness.
Mm. That's incredible. That's really amazing because I think that you're right. A lot of us think that meditation is just going inward or sitting cross-legged, closing your eyes and trying to like push your thoughts away. And to give them or to give us such tools to be able to try it in a different way, whether that's a walking meditation or yoga or even dancing. Like I love that depiction of like putting in, throwing on some music and just dancing, because the
Mm.
whole point is to come back to the present moment. When we're thinking, we're often thinking about the future or the past. It's all of these activities that you talked about was being in the present moment. And that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing
And
that.
yeah, and you know, like one of the things, because I used to play basketball, and I tell a lot of times people, when you hear about, you know, like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or whoever, like last few seconds of the game, time slows down and they are able to be in what we call in the zone. That is presence. That is where we tap in when we are actually meditating. So it doesn't, you know, necessarily need to be as we are talking, just all cross-legged sitting. It can be even playing like high performance sports, and you just tap into that zone where you're so present that everything slows down. Like I know in my experience, I had so many of those moments that when I started realizing, it's like, oh wow, I'm like, this is like a movie. The world is actually moving in slow motion, and I'm going at regular speed. And it's like, it feels at some points when I was doing that, like, oh, I
Yeah.
cheated the game. And this is kind of like realizing, you know, something like in the Matrix kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's also like, it's really trippy when that happens, but it's like, oh, like I was in it and I was, I'm fully here and present. It's always nice as validation. I'm really interested to hear about conscious action and you being you. What inspired you to, start that initiative? And can you tell us a little bit more about what you do there?
Yes, sure. So, you know, through the years of working on myself and discovering more and more and uncovering more and more, I also realized how most of my experience that I was, in a sense, changing and evolving internally, that started to change how I was also connecting to the outside, how I was connecting to people, how I was connecting to the environment. And I realized through that connection and through feeling of that connection that my actions weren't matching my beliefs and my values anymore. So as I evolved and I realized which were my new values, I started to make sure that my actions started to align with my values. Like, for example, what I was eating, what I was purchasing, how I was living every single day. So there were a lot of things. And through that, I started to realize, okay, like there is this thing of the inner and the outer and how they are connected. And that's where conscious action was born, in a sense. Like, I was actually with my co-founder. This was back in 2016. We actually went out to watch a documentary, and it was the documentary Plastic Ocean, which I really recommend it for anyone that hasn't seen it. It's all about, you know, plastic pollution. So it's a really negative topic. And when the event ended, I thought, I was hearing some of the people outside and they were all talking about, oh my God, we are doomed. This is, they were in such a negativity space, much worse than what they went into the space. So I thought this was such a missed opportunity to actually, now that everyone is there, to help them to connect and to understand, okay, what can I do? Like, what are the steps that I can do? What can I learn from this new information that I have? And not what can we do as the world, because like that's too big. It's like, what is the next one action that I can take? So then that evolved into us studying conscious action, creating events that were all around raising awareness of different topics that had to do with life, and then understanding, okay, now how do we turn that into actions for each individual person? So we started to bring a lot of different guest speakers and sharing different perspectives and creating circles and a lot of different things. And then that morphs into some online stuff and the podcast. So there's been a lot of amazing things in creating that community, and to be able to see as well how it's not just one thing. It's not like, it's not just about meditation. It's not about sustainability. It's not about like how we purchase things. It's not about clothing. It's about all of it. Like we need to, we are multifaceted beings, and we need to understand all of that. And some people might connect more with this or with that. So like just trying to get an entry point for everyone to come to the place that, in a sense, everything is about well-being. Our well-being as individuals, the well-being of us as a collective, and the well-being of the planet. And that is where all of that came from. And then with you being you, with another co-founder, it was super synchronistic situation that just happened. I won't go into it because it's too long. But basically, we just connected into some of the ideas that we wanted to bring. And we wanted to bring more teachings that were for our modern life with ancient wisdom, and having an understanding more from the heart. So not so much from the mind, but more from a heart-led perspective. So heart-centered teachings, which of course we use the mind, just making sure that we're bringing it from there. So now for the last 7 years, we've been doing online courses and different coaching programs. So it's been beautiful, to be able to share this and for me to collaborate. It's one of the things that I love the most, not doing things by myself, as I believe that we're not here to compete. I believe that we are here to co-create and to collaborate. So, the more that I can do that, a lot of times, the easier that and more beautiful life is.
Yeah, I love that. I'm very curious to know, how do you tie what you've learned in the neuroscience field with the stuff that you're leading from a heart-centered place? Like, where do those two things kind of culminate together, and how do you use that in these two spaces that you're in?
Yeah, thank you for that. I believe that when we're talking a lot of times of practices, there's a tendency to just focus on one thing. There's no separation. There's no separation of the heart and the mind. Like there's no separation of the heart, mind, gut, spirit. There's no separation. We might be focusing on something just because most of us hadn't had that before. But it's all about aligning and aligning our head and heart, for example, because most people are just head, and just heart doesn't work for our modern life, unless I decide to go completely off grid and there's no money, there's no work, there's nothing from our modern life that I need to plan ahead or think, and I can just be fully in the moment, present, living from like, oh, my heart wants to go there, and I can just sit by that tree. Like, that's wonderful to be able to understand how I can be guided by the wisdom of my body and my heart, using the discernment of my amazing mind. And this is one of the things a lot of times that I say to people a lot when I'm doing these teachings, especially when I'm sharing some mindfulness or meditation practices. a lot of people think that, as we talked about, they need to quiet the mind. The mind is not the bad guy here. Like, it seems a lot of times with some of the circles that I'm moving in spirituality, as if the mind is the bad guy and we need to live from the heart. It's like the mind is amazing. The mind is potentially our friend. We just need to actually understand how to develop a better relationship with our mind, and how does it work, and how do we befriend it, because it's there to protect us. And a lot of the conditioning that we have, a lot of the programming that we have, it's all about protecting us to survive. That is what it has learned. And this, like I do a lot of work with trauma and ancestral healing, and a lot of different things that there's an understanding when, of course, this is a thought that is going to come up when I'm trying to do that thing, because it's trying to protect me. Now, as I developed through time a better relationship with my mind, I understood I don't need to listen. That is not true. That is just a perspective based on something that has been learned. And I can listen to it and I can be like, okay, does that make sense? Just like I would listen to anybody else outside of my head. And they might give me their 2 cents on something. It's like, well, I can take it or leave it, but it's up to me.
Absolutely. A lot of what you're talking about here is mindfulness, right? Discernment and listening to, like, paying attention, because a lot of us are just on autopilot and we're just listening to these thoughts, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling this fear, or I'm going down this negative rabbit hole. But what we're talking about here is mindfulness and, like, observing and trying to figure out, like, what part of our mind or part of our brain is talking to us. Is it the ego, or is it actual logic and reason, right? Is it trying to keep me safe, or does this make sense, type of thing? So how do you define mindfulness, and why is it such, like, a crucial practice in our fast-paced world?
Yeah. Well, what you just said, it's really important to be able to create an understanding that we can actually become more aware. This is, for me, like meditation and mindfulness, like, they are super related. It's like they are first cousin, or even like twins. There, there's the understanding of, if I am present, I can actually pay attention to what is going on inside, outside. If I pay attention to what's going on, then I am much more better equipped to make decisions. And when I am mindful, not only I am present with what I'm doing, for example, I am talking here with you, where I could actually be talking here with you, and in my mind, I could be somewhere else. I know that, I train my mind enough to be able to be here with you, not to be anywhere else. And as well, what this leads is one of the most important aspects for me, as you were saying about that autopilot, is that in autopilot, we react. And when we are mindful, we can respond. Now, the action might be the same, but the motivation or where it is coming from is very different. And when I know how to respond appropriately to life, that changes a lot of the dynamics of my relationships, of my work, or whatever it is that I'm doing, but also my inner experience, because I am actually choosing. When I am choosing, I'm actually taking responsibility, I am taking control, and I am reclaiming my power, which for a lot of people, when we live in autopilot, we live in a victim mentality based on our circumstances. So we're a victim of our circumstances. When we take responsibility, we are able to be mindful of what is happening. We're present. We can respond appropriately, which means now I am choosing.
Well said. Absolutely. Yes. I don't have anything to add to that. That was just perfectly said. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, I like a lot of times, because I also teach here at university, and with a lot of my students, it's so interesting to be able to share this. And what I have found through the years is, with stuff like this is so simple. I mean, it's not easy a lot of times to unlearn our tendencies and to unlearn a lot of the things. Most ancient wisdom teachings and even some of the modern science teachings, they are simple stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, like the most challenging, like it's not math, like really advanced, like we're going to solve an equation to understand, like it's not that. We don't need to be quantum physicists to understand some of these things. We
Yeah.
can be, but it's about understanding how can we simplify things? How can we make it easier? And what is the entry point for each of us? That for me is about understanding. And this is my approach a lot of times with all of my students. It's like, okay, like let's try this. And we explore something. And then it's like, okay, let's explore this other thing. And then it's like, okay, which one worked for you? But it's all coming as well from an understanding, as I have gone through a lot of these experiences myself. And then I have worked with so many people through the years, is I understand as well what I need to say so that people don't get in their own way thinking, I cannot do this. Like I had a lot of times people tell me, I can't meditate or I can't do yoga. And I'm like, okay, let's stop. Like, why can't you? Like, what is actually the thing that you can't do? It's like, oh, well, I can't sit still, or I'm not, like I can stretch. And it's like, well, that's not yoga or that's not meditation.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a way of doing that. Every single type of body can do yoga, but because we have been shown so much, like the super lean, thin, like super elastic person practicing this, we believe that unless we are that, we cannot do it. Or unless we can sit completely quiet for hours, and we can't meditate. And it's about going beyond those, beliefs and being able to understand, that's a pitfall of our thinking. So I preemptively go to all of my students and it's like, well, this is going to happen. That is not how it is. Now let's explore it this way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to say about having a new perspective and going deeper and looking at what our core beliefs are and just, experimenting.
Yeah.
We mentioned a couple of times going on autopilot. And so I'm very curious. So what advice do you have for anybody that's looking to integrate conscious living practices, new methods into their busy schedules?
That is one of the things that I have been working on the last years because it's like, well, people don't have time. So, one of the things that I say a lot of times, for someone that is completely in autopilot, but they know that there's something different or that something is not working, is to be able to understand how to create small gaps during the day to slow down and to just stop and do nothing. Not even meditating. It's like just stop for a moment. It's as if you are pressing pause and just stop. In those moments, the more that we do that, immediately what's going to happen is that we're going to actually start to reflect. We can add on top of that some reflection. We can add some gratitude practices. We can add some conscious breathing. And the other big thing, besides finding small gaps during the day, is to start to hook into what you're already doing some of these practices. So, if you're a busy person, don't add 1 hour of sitting meditation. Perhaps find the things that you're already doing, like most people, we eat. So, in the moment that we're going to eat, taking literally 30 seconds before grabbing your cutlery and just take a few conscious breaths. That's it. A few conscious breaths. Not even, we don't need to like stop thinking or anything. Just a few conscious breaths, potentially feeling what's happening, potentially being grateful for the food that we have on top. That is already starting to create a new way. That is what already starts to create those new neural pathways because we start to do things differently. I always say, one of the easiest things as well is like, if you brush your teeth with your right hand, start doing it with your left. Again, that creates a new neural pathway. When we create new neural pathways, we start to be more plastic and more malleable in everything else that we're doing. like everything has a domino effect in a sense. So
Hmm.
when we're able to change small things, we are going to change all of it. And little by little, when we start introducing these little practices here and there, we're going to like be like, oh, I want more of that. I want more of that, because that feels mostly good with the knowing that, and this is for some people with trauma, not feeling, not being present is a coping mechanism as well. So most of us as well might have learned to disconnect with the present moment and with our experience because of trauma. So a lot of times we do need support from others to help us through that, because this, like taking the time to do all of these practices to be present might actually be what triggers us. So we need to understand, um, how we go as we are exploring different ways. So I always say, start small, more sustainable, something that you can do consistently, and start doing something like that. Even just, switching the toothbrush from which hand you use for 90 days. Because in the research that I've seen, most people think that to create a new habit, you need 21 days. Some people do. Some people, it takes almost like 80 days. So I often say, do something for 90 days, 3 months. If you're one of those people that you created a new neural pathway after 21 days, then the other almost 70 days are going to be super easy. And if you're someone that needs the almost 80 days, if you just do 21 days, that's not going to stick. So anytime that there's a new habit that we want to introduce, 3 months.
Oh, that's so brilliant. I always went with the 21 day, but that makes sense because some things I'm able to pick up just easily. And it's probably because I've already introduced that into my habits. But you're right, it can take up to 3 months to create that new
Yeah,
habit. I am
yeah.
really curious. Can you share a story or a moment from one of your workshops that illustrates the impact of your teachings?
Sure. I have so many stories. I'll share two, if I can,
Yes,
that,
please.
just are more present. So one was this woman that she had tried for many years doing yoga and doing meditation, and it never stick. She couldn't do it. And when she started like coming to some of my classes, after a while, she realized not only that she was able to still practice this even if she wasn't coming to the class. So this was transferring to her life. So she was able to be much more present with herself. But also, and this is what she told me, that by doing that, her relationship with her husband and her relationship with her daughter started to change for much better. So just for her doing these practices, it was with the intention of like being less stressed. It supported her relationships. That is a lot of times what I see, like that domino effect that I was talking on before. We don't know the ripple effects when we actually change something. And the other one was I was doing a family constellations workshop. Family constellation is a form of ancestral healing. I was doing this workshop, and this woman came, and she wanted to heal her relationship with her parents because she like had a really rough relationship with them. But she also hadn't spoken to her dad for, I think, that 9 years or something like that. And the day after the workshop, she called me and she's like, "You won't believe what happened. My dad called me out of the blue after 9 years of being completely estranged." And I'm like, well, that doesn't surprise me. I didn't tell her that it didn't surprise me. But I was like, this stuff can happen when we actually heal something. We don't know what's going to come on the other side. And I have so many stories of things like this that have happened. And one of the things that, for me, as I share those stories, this isn't about me, it's about them. They did the work. Like, this is one of the things that I always tell everyone that I work with. I do healing work. I don't heal. they heal themselves. I just create the environment, the container, the space for them to do the work, because I cannot do it for anyone. So if someone is willing to do the work on themselves, and perhaps they need some guidance, they need someone to accompany them, they need someone to walk with them, then I'm that person. But if they
Yeah.
are coming to see me because they want someone to heal them, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's so interesting because that's exactly what I tell people also when they come see me, because I see people going from healer to healer to healer because they want magic, and the work really starts from within. And I also love that you presenced how when we start to heal ourselves, it starts to heal all of our relations, everybody that's connected with us. And we don't do it because of that. That's just the result that happens when we find true healing, which is so beautiful. And I love that you were able to share some of those stories with us.
Yes, it's such a privilege to be able to make a living like doing this, which I didn't even intend to do this. I was just like, people started asking me to share like all of the things that I had experienced, because I changed so much from being completely disconnected, being this shy kid, like being always in my mind and stressed out, to like the way that I live. And it's like, oh, well, I can share some of this. People pay me for this. Okay. Like, this is great. Like, I love doing this, and I keep on working on myself. Like, this one of the things that I keep on telling everyone. I love even, this, your questions. They make me reflect.
Mm,
They are spaces for me. Everything that I'm doing in relationship with someone, whether it is this conversation with my students at university or with any of my clients or even friends, it's all for me to learn. When I learned that I don't know anything, and that anything and anyone can be a teacher, then that changed a lot for me, because it's like, okay, like, yes, they might have learned something from me. I have learned something from them. I hadn't noticed it this way, or I didn't know that because I had never experienced that. But now, when another person comes with a similar experience, I can frame it different, because now I have an understanding. At one point, I didn't understand, because I had like a few clients at some point that were abused. I didn't know. I can work with the trauma. I didn't know the actual experience of that. And now I have worked with so many people like that have been through abuse, that I understand, and it's so much easier for me to work with those people, because now I have a lived experience from me sharing with those other clients.
that makes a lot of sense. That's so beautiful.
Hmm.
I have two more questions for you for today. This first one is, can you tell us about what is the most significant lesson or insight you've gained from your years of studying and teaching these practices?
Oof. Yeah, that's a good one. Um, I think that one of the I'll put it briefly into a couple of different things that I think that fit well together.
Perfect.
One is living in the present, expanding my awareness, and asking questions. Those three have been pivotal in my experience, and they are still pivotal in my experience now, because it allows me to, any single thing that is happening, to give me a different perspective, to not go with my conditioning, with my programming, even though I have been working for 20 years on that, like, that's still somewhere there.
Mhm.
So the more that I'm able to be present, the greater awareness I can expand and I can experience. And asking questions allow me to expand that awareness, to be able to understand who is the one that is making decisions. Why am I acting in the way that I'm acting? Why am I behaving in the way that I'm behaving? And how do I want to behave? So when I'm able to understand all of that, it's so much easier to be, in a sense, the one that has reclaimed their power, and to be the one that is choosing, instead of to be the victim of my circumstances.
I feel that. Thank you for packaging it up that way. And then lastly, what offerings do you have going on, or what workshops do you have going on, and where can people find you?
Thank you for that. I do a lot of work in person here in Auckland, in New Zealand, for those that are here. But as well, I do a lot of online work. I work with a lot of people on a one-to-one capacity, on 3 month containers, 6 month containers, 1 year container, exploring all of the different methodologies that I use because I tailor a lot of my work and I personalize it to everyone's situation. I offer as well one-off sessions online with family constellations, meditation, different forms of energy healing. I have some online courses as well on conscious living. And I have the Conscious Action podcast as well. That there's hundreds of episodes over there if anybody wants to listen to that. And at the moment, I'm developing more and more stuff. So yes, it's really really exciting. But people can check out my website or social media through my name, Brian Berneman, or they can also check Conscious Action, NZ as New Zealand, or ubingu.org.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit of your wisdom with us. I so
Yeah.
appreciate it. I really enjoyed the space that we shared and all of the knowledge that you shared as well. For those of
Thank
you
you
that
for, yeah.
go
I
ahead.
was just going to say thank you for providing the space. Thank you for the questions and for, creating this so that people can get informed. And, if for anybody listening, if you resonated with something, like what's one action that you can actually start implementing? Don't just allow it to be information.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. And if you enjoyed this episode, let us know what action you have decided to take and implement down below. And we will see you on the next one.